you for our OLOFOS seminar. Today we welcome Vincent Grandjean from the University of Neuchatel, who will give a talk about indeterminate personal identity. Thanks a lot. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the invitation. So, it's actually my first time at UC Louvain, so but I've seen that much of my work resonates with the ongoing research at the OLOFOS group. So I'm very looking forward to the discussion. As you can hear, so my mother tongue is French, but I've been asked to give this talk in English, so I hope it will be clear and easy to follow. In any case, I think that my slides are quite detailed, so So the paper we'll be presenting today differs a bit from what I usually do in the philosophy of time. But the thing is that last term I had the opportunity to teach on Derek Parfit, Reasons and Person at the University of Neuchatel. And in that context, I developed what I hope to be a quite original response to an important objection called the fission objection that is usually raised against the psychological accounts of diachronic personal identity. And this is this response that I would like to discuss with you today. So here is the outline of my 55 minute presentation, I guess. So I will start with an introduction to the psychological account of diachronic personal identity and present what seems to be an acceptable formulation of the view. Second, I will introduce the fission objection and review some of the existing yet unsatisfactory responses to it, including those by Derek Parfit and David Lewis. Third, I will present my own proposal, which involves a specific kind of metaphysical indeterminacy, and I will detail the many benefits of this approach. And finally, I will move to the potential objections and offer some replies to them. Okay, so let's get started. So the problem of diachronic personal identity finds its modern conception in John Locke's essay concerning human understandings. It's the second book, chapter 27. And it can be formulated as follows. What is required for a person to persist from one time to another? So more specifically, under what necessary and sufficient condition is a person P1 at a time t numerically identical to a person P2 at a later time t star? And a paradigmatic response to this question, reflecting John Locke's own position, is called the psychological account, psi, which says that P1 is identical to P2 if and only if P2 at T star remembers an experience P1 had at T. So for example, if P1 was punished at T and P2 remembers at T star undergoing that punishment, then P1 and P2 are numerically the same person. And I think that psi captures two widely held intuitions. So first, persons differ from ordinary material objects, such as chairs or computers, in their persistent conditions. And two, experience memory provides the criterion for personal identity over time. So I think that at this point it is crucial to distinguish experience memory from factual memory. So factual memory is memory that something happened. So for example, remembering that Switzerland eliminated France at Euro 2021. Just an example. And experience memory, by contrast, is memory of events one has witnessed or undergone. Okay, so it is typically expressed in first personal terms, such as I remember undergoing a punishment. And this is this latter notion of memory that plays a key role in. So, of course, one can reject the psychological account. So, for instance, E.T. Olson argues that diachronic personal identity should be grounded in biological continuity rather than psychological continuity, while philosophers such as Chisholm or Swinburne hold that experience memory can at best provide evidence for personal identity but does not analyze it, since personal identity is taken to be primitive. But this is not the issue I want to address here. So my paper is not about defending the psychological account against rival theories. Rather, it is about defending the internal consistency of Psi. And this is a quite difficult task because Psi has been confronted with many objections over the centuries. Among the most famous are the transitivity objection, the circularity objection, and the fission objection. So I will briefly discuss the first two since they motivate the reformulation of Psi, and then I will focus on the fission objection, which is arguably the most challenging one. Okay, so let me start with the first objection, so the transitivity objection. So the transitivity objection shows that Psi fails to provide a necessary condition for P1 and P2 to be identical. Why? Because P2 may not remember a T star having had a specific experience, even though she had this experience at earlier time T. So for example, a P2 may not remember receiving a punishment, even though she received that punishment as a child. And this is particularly problematic because it allows one to build a case in which P2 remembers an experience of P1, P3 remembers an experience of P2, but P3 has forgotten the relevant experience of P1. So a case in which Psi seems to predict that P2 is identical to P1, P3 is identical to P2, but P3 is not identical to P1, which betrays the transitivity of the identity relation, right? Okay.
Sorry, I have a small question for clarification.
Yeah.
It's enough that there's one experience that is remembered, right? It doesn't have to be the same necessarily.
Yeah, exactly.
So for this counterexample to work, you need to have no memory at all of any experiences from the first time, right?
No, here just if you forget just a specific experiment will be sufficient. But you're anticipating a bit the solution that will arrive, which is psychological continuity, and here we will have like the overlapping trick, which will be used to solve the objection. But first, the circularity objection, second objection, against Psi. So the circularity objection shows that the concept of memory presupposes the concept of identity and thus fails to analyze, at least non-circularly, the fact that P1 and P2 are identical. So to see this, consider a case in which two persons seem to remember the same past experience. So, for example, observing a blue cube, but only one of them has genuine memory, the other has just been hypnotized, let's say. So how do we distinguish the real memory from the fake one? And it seems that the most natural answer is to say that the person who has the real memory is identical to the one who had the original experience. But if we can only truly remember what happened to us, then Psi is clearly circular, right? You cannot use memory to analyze identity, since it is presupposed in the very concept of memory. Hopefully, it is now widely accepted that these two objections are not definitive. So an appropriate reformulation of Psi allows one to overcome them. First, the transitivity objection can be addressed by introducing psychological continuity, and I think that this is what you anticipated. So psychological continuity does not require direct memories between P1 and P2 for them to be identical, but only an overlapping chain of direct memories. So ordinary cases of forgetting are no longer a threat, to identity. Okay. And second, the circularity objection can be addressed by introducing the concept of quasi-memory, which shares all essential features with memory, but does not presuppose nor exclude that the person who has memory at T star of a specific event is numerically identical to the one who experienced this event at earlier time T. So even if P2 cannot remember doing something she did not do but someone else did, P2 could still remember it. Okay. So of course, these replies come with their own difficulties, but still, they allow one to formulate a reasonably coherent version of psi, which is psi star, which will serve as a starting point for our discussion this afternoon. So P1 is identical to P2 even if P2 at T star is linked by to P1 at T by psychological continuity, which is a suitably robust network of psychological connection, including but not limited to quasi-memories. Why do I say not limited to quasi-memories? Because defenders of psi star typically take psychological continuity to involve a wider range of connections, such as intentions or quasi-intentions, character traits, agency, and other psychological features. Cool. Let me now turn to the fission objection, which was originally developed by David Wiggins, based on a case due to Sidney Shoemaker. So roughly, this objection threatens the sufficiency of psychological continuity by showing that two persons at T star can each be psychologically continuous with a single person at T. Okay, so let me detail this objection. Yeah, first, three preliminary remarks. So one, our brains are composed of two structurally similar hemispheres, so the left and the right hemisphere, that perform distinct functions. So cognitive studies generally attribute linguistic and mathematical abilities to the left hemisphere, while the right hemisphere is responsible for other abilities such as pattern recognition or musicality and so on. Two, the abilities of each hemisphere are neither fixed nor permanent. So for example, a person who experiences a stroke in the left hemisphere will temporarily experience a regression in her linguistic abilities, resembling those of a young child. However, in such cases, the right hemisphere will work to compensate for these losses by gradually relearning the necessary skills to regain adult-level speech. And three, both hemispheres are not necessary for survival. So some people have undergone an hemispherectomy, which is the removal of one of their hemisphere as a drastic, but it seems efficient treatment for otherwise inoperable brain tumors or severe epileptic symptoms. But despite this surgery, these people have survived and they have continued to lead functional lives with normal language abilities. So they have everything needed to be considered as persons. That's the point I wanted to make. Now, these preliminary remarks invite us to take seriously the following scenario. So this is scenario one. So imagine a person experiences a severe accident that destroyed her left hemisphere and some vital functions. So the doctor decides to transplant the remaining half of her brain into another brainless body, transferring memories as well. So according to Psi, in this scenario, the individual who emerges post-surgery should be considered first a person, right? Since the transplanted hemisphere will take over the function of the first hemisphere, so similar to when someone is incapacitated by a stroke. And two, it should be considered as the same person as the one who experienced the accident, as the recipient would be psychologically continuous with her through, for example, overlapping quasi-memories of events, right? So scenario one does not seem to be too problematic for psi-star. Of course, it would be a completely different story if you're like an animalist or someone like this, but for psi theorists, this is not a real problem. More problematic, however, is scenario two. So imagine a person, P1, who undergoes a severe accident, but remarkably, neither hemisphere of her brain is damaged. So a decision is made to transplant each hemisphere into two separate brainless bodies. So in this scenario, the two recipients, so P2 and P3, will each have a brain structure that would enable them to recover the skills and abilities of the hemisphere they are missing. And they will both be psychologically continuous with the person who had the accident, namely P1. So in this scenario, psi-star seems to predict that P2 and P3 are both identical to P1. And by transitivity, that P2 is identical to P3, which is absurd. I mean, if P2 and P3 are numerically identical, they cannot be two, right? So here we have a problem. So this is how the fission objection challenges psi-star and suggests that it may not be sufficient for explaining diachronic personal identity in all cases. How can psi theorists respond to this objection? Well, it seems that three potential options can be immediately dismissed. So first, psi theorists cannot say that P1 ceases to exist post-fission, at least assuming that the surgery is successful. Why? Because post-fission individuals retain all essential attributes for psychological continuity with P1, and psychological continuity, according to psi-star, is precisely what constitutes a survival, right? Second, psi theorists cannot say that P1 is identical to P2, or alternatively that P1 is identical to P3, as this would be completely arbitrary. I mean, both P2 and P3 are psychologically continuous with P1, making it impossible to justify favoring one over the other. And third, psi theorists cannot argue that P1 survives as a single person with a divided mind across two distinct bodies. I mean, this option might sound plausible, perhaps like 1 second after the fission, after the surgery, but then P2 and P3 can quickly form incompatible intentions, develop divergent characters, or even fail to recognize each other, if they were to meet. So, I mean, this would be deeply counterintuitive to regard them as the same person, right? Okay. At least this is what Parfit argues in Reasons and Persons. Okay. Now, despite these limitations, important philosophers, including Derek Parfit and David Lewis, have proposed interesting approaches to address the fission objection. So I will briefly expose the solutions and the main drawbacks. So first, Parfit argues that the difficulty in addressing the fission objection arises from a false assumption, namely that survival requires identity. So this assumption leads to the belief that if P1 survives a brain fission, there must result someone identical to P1. And Parfit suggests that this assumption is largely a product of the limitations of current medical technology, which allows us to survive only by ensuring that someone identical to us exists, in the future. So Parfit refutes this assumption. by stating that survival and identity are complete separate notions, and that a person can survive fission as two separate persons without being identical to either of them. So according to Parfit, one can have survival without identity. So in a nutshell, Parfit's solution to the fission scenario is to say that a person P1 can survive brain fission as two numerically distinct persons, P2 and P3, who are still psychologically continuous with P1 by having, for instance, quasi-memories of past experiences lived by P1. Okay? So I think that Parfit's solution is really clever, but it also has some drawbacks that I can mention, and perhaps mention three of them. First drawback, so his solution departs from a central principle of C star, namely that psychological continuity alone is sufficient for the same person to persist. Instead, Parfit introduces an extra condition. So future person P2 is identical to a present person P1 only if 1. P2 is psychologically continuous with P1, so this is the original condition, and 2. P1 does not undergo a brain fission that would create two separate persons, P2 and P3. And this extra condition, that identity cannot hold across fission, leads to the second drawback. So if only one hemisphere of P1's brain is transplanted, the resulting person P2 counts as identical to P1, but if both hemispheres are transplanted into different bodies, neither P2 nor P3 is identical to P1. Thus, identity will depend on facts that are extrinsic, to P1 and P2, which violates the David Wiggins Only A and B principle. I don't know if you're familiar with the principle. So it's a principle that states that facts about objects other than A and B are completely irrelevant as to whether A is identical to B. Okay, principle that seems to be quite intuitive. So of course, Parfit replies that this violation merely illustrates the primacy of survival over identity. So what matters most, according to him, are psychological connections, not identity, not strict identity. But, and this is the third drawback, it is very difficult to accept that identity is not what matters in survival, as we tend to see ourselves and others as unique, and irreplaceable. So, for example, in a dangerous situation, such as an impending avalanche, it seems that what we care about is whether someone identical to us, will exist in the future. So, yeah, I think that Parfit's solution is counterintuitive in many respects. Okay, let's move to.
I'm sorry,
yeah.
I have another clarification about this. So, does Parfit have a criterion for identity here? Because this is just psychological continuity. You didn't say anything about what his definition for identity is. It doesn't seem to. You say that in words, but it's not on the slides.
Yeah.
And he says it's psychological continuity plus not fission.
Yeah,
that
exactly.
seems to be extremely ad hoc.
It's completely ad hoc, but this is how it is.
He says that literally.
He says that literally.
That's
yeah,
awful.
exactly.
Sorry.
So, and actually, that's awful. And actually, it is even more technical than that because Parfit thinks that, especially in long life cases, I will mention one of them later. Identity can be indeterminate. So it is not even clear that psychological continuity is a necessary condition, for identity.
But that makes sense.
That makes sense. Yeah, this was just a way to say that the.
But we keep that for the discussion.
Yeah, that the definition of identity is more complex than what I presented here. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, let's move to David Lewis' solution. So Lewis agrees with Parfit that fission is not equivalent to death. Okay, so one can survive to a fission. But he denies that the two persons resulting from fission are new existents. Instead, Lewis posits that P2 and P3 already existed prior to fission, coinciding by sharing temporal parts, okay, or stages, and then diverged after fission by having distinct temporal parts located at later times. So, the relationship between P2 and P3 before fission is quite similar to that of the statue and the clay it is made of. See, although they are, at least according to certain interpretation, numerically distinct, they share intrinsic features such as mass, spatial location, and material parts. So that's the Lewis approach of the case. So of course there are some immediate drawbacks. So the first one is that it leads to the curious implication that two persons can share a single body and have joint thoughts at a time, which is much more peculiar than simply assuming that there is only one person before fission, right? So imagine, and anyway, you have the impression that I'm alone giving this talk, but what you don't know is that this brain will undergo in fission in, 30 years, and that you're actually listening to two people, not only one person, right? And that's really weird, in a sense. Yeah. And two, Lewis' solution commits to a four-dimensionalist conception of persons as mere aggregate of person stages, which is also counterintuitive in many respects. So, according to E.T. Olson, for instance, this creates uncertainty about what we are referring to when we use the pronoun I, leaving indeterminacy about what things, but also what sort of things we are.
Oops. Now you did it. Sorry. Look.
No, I'm just trying to stop because the microphone here are on. And
I don't know. It shouldn't be a problem, but I don't think we're.
Yeah, but I'm paranoid. If I see a microphone that I don't control, I don't know who is on the other line. Okay, sorry guys.
I'll look at the break. I'll look at the break.
Do an essay or no?
No, fine. Yeah, exactly. That's it.
Okay. So yeah, there is a problem with the solution. So there is some indeterminacy about our use of the pronoun I. Okay, but there are also many other famous problems with this theory. I will not develop now, but there is the famous personite problem. There is also the problem with the gap between the locus of agency versus the locus of responsibility. So they are not numerically identical. So yeah, there are many problems of this kind. So yeah, Lewis' solution is not entirely satisfying. Okay, let's move to the positive part of the talk, namely my solution to the fission objection. So the basic idea is to challenge the so-called determinacy assumption, which holds that there is a determinate answer as to whether a post-fission person, so either P2 or P3, is identical to the pre-fission person P1. So with both post-fission persons share psychological continuity. So more specifically, the determinacy assumption states that if 1, there is a person P1 at a time t, and 2, there is a person P2 at a later time t star, then it is either determinately true or determinately false that P2 is identical with P1. And this assumption lies at the heart of the previous approaches and maybe the source of their implausibility. Of course, my aim is not to deny that the determinacy assumption serves our practical needs, in everyday situations, but rather to show that it may not apply in every unusual situation that philosophers can conceive, including the fission scenarios. It must be acknowledged that the determinacy assumption has already been questioned by Parfit, that I mentioned earlier, but also by Bernard Williams and Mark Johnston, for instance, who explored the possibility that statements like P2 is identical to P1 and P3 is identical to P1 are neither true nor false when P2 and P3 both result from a Brownian fission of P1. So this lack of truth value is meant to capture the idea that personal identity can admit borderline cases in which it fails to apply determinately. But these attempts have typically been dismissed for two reasons. So first, they conflict with the common belief that diachronic personal identity is something that can be known from a first-person viewpoint, right? And two, they violate bivalence, true P or false P, which is implied by two fundamental principles of classical logic and semantics, so namely the excluded middle, so P or not P, together with Tarski's law, so P is true if and only if P. Considering these two drawbacks, I believe that only the second presents a significant issue, at least if one wants to preserve classical logic and Tarskian semantics. The first drawback, however, does not pose a real problem. I mean, and this is something that I mentioned earlier, but even philosophers with whom I disagree, like Parfit or Lewis, accept that the diachronic identity of persons can be indeterminate, just as the diachronic identity of material objects can be indeterminate. Although there is, of course, a further debate about the nature of that indeterminacy. So, and this is the case that we mentioned earlier, but David Lewis introduces the case of Methuselah. So a person whose life is so long that there are no psychological connection between early and late stages. So Methuselah at 900 remembers nothing of Methuselah at 25 and shares none of his attitudes or character traits. So of course, in this case, one can still argue that identity is fully determinate, as psychological continuity is guaranteed, with the overlapping trick. But Lewis suggests that a more natural view is that some statements about Methuselah's identity are indeterminate in truth value. And I think that it is more or less your intuition. So showing that first-person knowledge cannot by itself rule out indeterminate personal identity. So for example, while the statement Methuselah age 900 is identical to Methuselah age 25 is determinately false, the statement Methuselah age 900 is identical to Methuselah age 800 might be indeterminate in truth value. So I think that, yes, if we put ourselves in Methuselah's shoes, at least at the age of 900, it's not an easy task, it seems entirely possible to be uncertain whether we are diachronically identical to this or that person at earlier time, right? However, as I said, the first drawback is more problematic. So at least if one wants to preserve classical logic and Tarskian semantics. Why? Because rejecting bivalence forces us to give up either the excluded middle or Tarski's law, okay, which is a substantial theoretical cost. At least some philosophers think it is. Williamson, for instance. Moreover, one cannot simply declare a fission identity statement to be exceptions to bivalence without specifying an alternative logical framework, right? You have to say something positive here. But the difficulty is that the main alternatives come with well-known problems. So consider, for instance, Klinis or Lukasiewicz tree-valued logics, So in both systems, a statement such as P1 is identical to P2 or P1 is not identical to P2 is neither true nor false, since the semantics is truth functional. But of course, it is unacceptable in our context. I mean, even if it is indeterminate whether P1 is identical to P2, it must still be determinate that P1 either is or is not, identical to P2. Concerning supervaluationism, since it is what you're interested in, it preserves the excluded middle while allowing for true value gaps, but only by abandoning the Tarskian schema. And this, again, can be seen as a costly sacrifice. Moreover, supervaluationism struggles to model fission. Why? Because, I mean, there is nothing in our ordinary use of the predicate is the same person as that could lead one to choose P2 over P1 or P1. To choose P2 over P3 or P3 over P2, as the person with one P1 is identical. So to put it another way, it seems that no admissible sharpening or precisification can be derived, from our everyday usage of the dyadic predicate is the same person as. So yeah, supervaluationism doesn't seem to be optimal here. But hopefully, it seems possible to develop a concept of indeterminate personal identity that is consistent with the main principle of classical logic and Tarskian semantics. This concept of indeterminacy draws inspiration from the way Robert Williams, Elizabeth Barnes, or Ross Cameron address phenomena such as vagueness and the open future. But actually, I think that this concept is better adapted for fission scenarios. I will come back to this in a moment. So as you know, indeterminacy can be of different kinds, such as semantic, epistemic, but the kind of indeterminacy I will focus on is metaphysical or ontic. So metaphysical indeterminacy arises when it is unsettled how the world is at its most fundamental level. In this sense, it is not merely a matter of incomplete representation that can be resolved through precisification, for instance, but rather a fundamental unsettledness in what is being represented. More specifically, one can distinguish between two ways in which the world might be indeterminate. So there is first underdetermination, when there are no states, so that the world is unsettled as to whether something obtains. And you have the overdetermination, when there are too many determinate states, so that the world is unsettled as to which one obtains. And this is this second form of metaphysical indeterminacy, so over-determination, that seems to be involved in the fission case. So perhaps just to clarify the distinction between these two kinds of indeterminacy, here is a metaphor. So think of two teenagers, so one poor, the other very rich, getting ready for a party. So they might both be indeterminate as to what to wear, for the occasion, but for very different reasons. So the poor teenagers, because she has nothing to wear, okay, this would be the case of underdetermination, and the rich teenager because she has too many dresses, that will fit for the event. So she's how do we say this in English? She's spoiled for choice. We say this? Spoiled. Oh, nice. So this would be the case of overdetermination. Now my central idea is quite straightforward. So in fission cases, the existence of multiple fully determinate candidates, so P2 and P3, generates a form of metaphysical overdetermination. As a result, the world itself fails to determine which of these candidates is identical to the pre-fission person P1. So more precisely, there are two determinate candidate states of affairs, namely that P1 is diachronically identical to, that P2 is diachronically identical to P1, and that P3 is diachronically identical to P1, but it is indeterminate which one of these two states of affairs obtains. So, crucially, this indeterminacy is not located within the states of affairs themselves. So there are no intrinsically indeterminate identity facts. So rather, indeterminacy arises because the world contains several incompatible yet equally legitimate candidate states of affairs. So the indeterminacy does not concern the internal content of the relevant states. Each is perfectly determinate, but it concerns which of them is realized. Okay? So from a semantic perspective, it is determinate that either an identity statement, I-phi, or its negation, non-I-phi, is true, but there is indeterminacy about which one is true. And this indeterminacy arises due to brute uncertainness between various possible ways the world could be, resulting in I-phi and its negation being metaphysically indeterminate in truth value. So this determinacy does not imply that the necessary worldly condition for truth and falsity of IP are absent, as this would be a case of underdetermination. Rather, it reflects a lack of specificity concerning which determinate condition obtained. Okay, so this is really a case of forward determination. Well, to be completely honest, I'm not entirely sure that this concept of metaphysical overdetermination makes sense. Robert Williams and Elizabeth Barnes have developed different frameworks for interpreting metaphysical indeterminacy as overdetermination. So Williams work with multiple actualized worlds, whereas Barnes expresses metaphysical indeterminacy as indeterminacy about which of several precise and incompatible possible worlds is the actual world, and so on. But in any case, my point is not to defend an account of metaphysical indeterminacy per se. My point is really more modest. It is simply to say that if one accepts metaphysical indeterminacy of this kind, then fission cases provide a far more natural and compelling application than the traditional cases in which such indeterminacy is usually invoked, namely cases of vagueness. Okay. And this is because in cases of vagueness, we do not observe two versions of Max, say, so one bald, the other not, constituting two states of affairs between which the world would be like stuck. Now, by contrast, the case of fission provides a clear example of metaphysical overdetermination. So we can directly observe the simultaneous existence of P2 and P3, which under ordinary circumstances will determinately be identical to P1 due to psychological continuity. Cool. So I think that this approach of the fission case has many benefits, so I will mention four of them. So one, it allows one to accept the principle of bivalence without restriction and thus to stick to classical logic and Tarskian semantics. So any statement, including any identity statement, is neither true nor false, so bivalence seems to be preserved, even though it may be indeterminate which one is true and which one is false. This approach provides a straightforward explanation as to why we cannot know which of P2 or P3 is identical to P1. So the world is indeterminate in this regard, and we cannot know more than what is determinately the case. 3, it avoids the problematic notion of multiple occupancy. So, contrary to Lewis' view, there is never any spatiotemporal coincidence of two persons. So before fission, there is only one unique person, but it is indeterminate whether this person is identical to P2 or to P3 after. fission. In fact, the proposed approach can be understood as the exact opposite of Lewis' approach. So in Lewis' approach, indeterminacy, albeit semantic, arises before fission. So pre-fission uses of the pronoun I are indeterminate in reference, as it may refer either to P2 or to P3, who are, spatio-temporally coincident. And the fission resolves the issues by separating their temporal parts. Okay. By contrast, in my approach, indeterminacy arises after fission. So post-fission uses of the pronoun I are indeterminate, as it may refer either to a new existent or to the person who existed before fission. And this seems to be a clear advantage of my approach, because it is far more natural to conceive brain fission, so a very bizarre operation, as giving rise to indeterminacy rather than resolving it. Fourth benefit, unlike Parfit, my approach regards psychological continuity as a sufficient condition for identity, respecting the spirit of Psi-star. For it maintains that where there is psychological continuity, there is identity. But the subtlety lies in the fact that psychological continuity alone is not sufficient for identity to be determinate. Okay. So I think that here a bit of formalization can clarify the matter. So let's see the relation being psychologically continuous with. So like Parfit, I think that one must acknowledge that the fission objection forces about the original formulation of Psi-star key principle, which says that for all x and for all y, if y is psychologically continuous with x, then y is identical with x. And this is because two post-fission persons can be psychologically continuous with x at the same time, which is incompatible with the very concept of identity. However, my approach differs from Parfit's by preserving another principle, which is the following. For all x, for all y, for z, if y is psychologically continued with x and z is psychologically continued with x, then either y is identical with x or z is identical with x. And this second principle establishes that psychological continuity is a sufficient condition for identity, so as the material implication shows, without specifying which of the two psychologically continuous entities, so either y or z, is identical to x. Okay? It only states that one of them is. So to put it another way, this principle expresses a disjunctive sufficiency claim. Psychological continuity guarantees that identity holds with someone, even if it fails to settle with one. 10 more minutes for the objection? Okay, cool.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So let's move to the potential objection. A first objection to the proposed approach is that it appears vulnerable to the famous Evans paradox of indeterminate identity. So I just adapted the paradox to our context. So it can be stated as follows. So one, it is indeterminate whether P1 is identical to P2. Two, P1 has the property of being indeterminately identical with P2. Three, it is not indeterminate whether P2 is identical to P2. Yeah. Four, P2 does not have the property of being indeterminately identical with P2. This is from 3. And 5, P1 is not identical with P2 from 2 and 4. And here we have a contradiction between 1 and 5. However, I don't think that this argument applies in the present context. So, as philosophers such as Stolnecker and Sider have argued, Evans' paradox shows at most that there can be no vague identity statement of the form A is identical with B when the singular terms A and B have precise and fixed reference. By contrast, when there is referential indeterminacy, vagueness in identity statement can be accommodated. And I think that this is exactly what happens here Why? Because auto premise 3 is true, so as whatever P2 picks out is self-identical, the move from 3 to 4 is problematic. And the issue lies in the fact that in premise 4, P2 is referentially indeterminate. So unlike P1, which consistently refers to the surviving person throughout the argument, P2 can refer to two different persons, so either to the surviving person or to the newly created person. And I think that the paradox crucially relies on this sliding between these two readings. But once this ambiguity is made explicit, I think that the inference from 3 to 4 is completely blocked. So I think that Evans' paradox does not apply in my case. I'll move to 3 further objections rapidly. Yeah, this one. So another objection is that my view resembles an option rejected earlier, namely the claim that P1 is identical to P2, or alternative that P1 is identical to P3. So as a reminder, this option was set aside on the grounds that it is arbitrary. Since P2 and P3 stand in equally strong relation of psychological continuity to P1, there seems to be no non-arbitrary basis for choosing one rather than the other. However, my approach differs in a crucial respect. So it introduces indeterminacy as a fundamental feature of diachronic personal identity in extraordinary cases such as fission. So unlike the rejected option, which forces a determinate answer when none is warranted, my approach acknowledges that P1 is identical to one of the two post-fission persons, but it is indeterminate which one. So importantly, this indeterminacy is not an epistemic limitation nor an arbitrary stipulation. It reflects a deep metaphysical feature of identity in fission cases. So the absence of a reason to prefer P2 over P3 is not a problem to be resolved. Rather, it is evidence that personal identity itself can, in some cases, be genuinely indeterminate. And this point can be reinforced by asking whether such indeterminacy could be resolved. So suppose, for instance, that, I don't know, P2 were to die, right? Will this make it determinate true that P3 is identical to P1? I think that, no, clearly not. I mean, the elimination of one of the candidates does not settle the identity relation. So once fission renders identity indeterminate, that indeterminacy cannot be removed by subsequent external events, such as the death of one of the post-fission person. Another objection takes the form of a moral dilemma. So consider a case in which someone commits a serious crime, let's say a murder, shortly before undergoing fission. Okay? So it is metaphysically indeterminate which post-fission person is identical to the criminal. So the legal system seems to face a problem. So who, if anyone, should be held responsible and punished for the crime committed by P1? By the way, if you're interested in this specific question, I've written a whole article dedicated on it, which is called Fission et prison. This is in French, in La Revue Métaphysique et Morale. And the core claim of that paper is that this objection presupposes that numerical identity is necessary condition for moral responsibility. But this assumption is far from uncontroversial. So many philosophers, including David Shoemaker and Andrew Curry, think that moral responsibility does not fundamentally track personal identity, but rather psychological continuity. So especially memory, intentions, agency, and so on. And I must say that I'm quite sympathetic to this view. So responsibility appears to follow psychological continuity rather than strict numerical identity. And on this picture, it is plausible that both post-fission persons, so P2 and P3, should be held responsible for the crime committed to P1. If you disagree with me and maintain that no, responsibility must track identity, the problem is that fission becomes a way out, of responsibility. So of course you can say, yeah, but I mean, this is not a real problem since no one will choose fission over prison or over punishment. But I mean, things might change once the punishment is sufficiently severe. So for instance, if the criminal faces the death penalty, right, then fission might appear to be a preferable option, right? Especially if you think like Parfit or Lewis that one can survive, to the process. So yeah, anyway, it was a fun paper to write. A last objection against my approach is that it requires the rejection of the only A and B principle as defined by David Wiggins. See, as I said, so this principle states that facts about objects other than A and B are irrelevant as whether A is identical to B. See, this objection, as I said, primarily targets Parfit's approach, as Parfit makes personal identity logically dependent on the non-existence of another candidate. So as a reminder, one implication of Parfit's approach is that if only one hemisphere is transplanted while the other is destroyed, the post-fission person is identical to the pre-fission one. But if both hemispheres are transplanted, then the pre-fission person is identical to neither of the two post-fission persons, although the person can survive as both of them. But I think that the situation is less dramatic within my approach. So in a case where only one transplantation occurs, the fact that P2 is identical to P1 does not strictly depend on the existence of a second post-fission candidate P3. Because if there was such an additional candidate, it would not be determinately false that P2 is identical to P1. So what depends on the non-existence of P3 is only the determinacy of the identity statement. So, namely that there is a determinate answer as to whether P2 is identical to P1. Okay. This is a subtle but a crucial distinction. So in short, the proposed approach does not undermine Wiggins' principle. Rather, it suggests that determinacy regarding identity statement between P1 and P2 depends on fact about objects other than P1 and P2. So of course, one could accept a weakened version of Wiggins' principle, stating that the determinacy of the identity between I and B cannot depend on facts about objects other than A and B. But first, this principle would lose much of its intuitive force. And second, that would be begging the question, because in my approach, the determinacy arises precisely because there is not only B, but also C as a legitimate candidate for being identical with A, right? So, of course, the determinacy depends on external circumstances, okay? Okay, so here's my conclusion. So, as we have seen, that the fission objection has posed a significant challenge to philosophers who endorse the Lockean view that diachronic personal identity is to be analyzed in terms of experience memory. So this objection aims to show that psychological continuity alone is not sufficient for identity, as two persons, P2 and P3, may emerge from the point fission of one person, P1, each psychologically continuous with P1, but not both identical to her. So two influential replies to this objection have been developed by Derek Parfit and David Lewis, respectively. However, we have seen that both solutions have been criticized for their counterintuitive implication, such as the possibility of survival without identity and the idea of two persons sharing a single body and possessing joint thoughts. So in my paper, I propose an alternative approach. So it is indeterminate that either P2 or P3 is identical to P1, but it is metaphysically indeterminate which one it is. So this approach has two main benefits. So first, it preserves two intuitions, so that there is only one person before fission, right? And two, that survival is not disconnected from identity after fission, since two persons cannot survive without one of them being identical to the pre-fission person, even if it is indeterminate which one. And last benefit, this approach is consistent with David Wiggins Only and AB principle, as it makes the determinacy of identity and not identity itself dependent on the non-existence of another person. Well, thank you very much. Is that common to speak for 60 minutes?
Yes.
Wow.
Often they speak even longer.
Oh.
Because they say, oh yeah, no, I will take 45 minutes.
Yeah. les slides. Peut-être. Enfin, je sais pas si ça va être de la discussion.
Si tu veux, oui, en général. Désolé.
Case you need them. Is he back?
When I have to speak English,
There we
I put more text on the slide. I feel more confidence.
Yeah, Charles, you said we are back.
Yeah, we're back. We're back, so questions?
Okay. This is very interesting. So I was just wondering about ways the world could be made more determinate that would then determine which one I am. So we know that if there's only one person, it'll be me, right? And then otherwise, if there are two candidates, now it's overdetermined.
So if there is only one person, it will be you. So this is fully determinate. And as soon as you get two outcomes, so after the fission, there will be some indeterminacy.
Right, and so that seems to suggest that a way of making the world more determinate from that point on would be to remove one of the two people.
Yeah, that's a good point, yeah.
But if that's the case, my sort of attitude towards my own future are a bit strange because, so like I'm told, first, you will have this, you undergo this fission. So then I think, okay, but I'll survive. I don't know which one I'll be, but I know I'll survive. And then, so I'm like hoping things go well for both, because I could be either. And then I'm told, in 6 months, P3 will die. And now I think, oh, thank goodness I'm P2, because now I know I won't be P3, because P3 will resolve the determination. But that kind of seems, so that kind of combination of thoughts seem like they can't be right. Both the like, I'm first wishing for things to go well for both of these people, either of whom might be me, and then happy that one of them will die, given that then it settles the question who I will be.
Yeah, that's very interesting. See, what you're pointing out is a kind of dilemma that I have. So the case is, what happens if P3 dies? And here there are two possibilities. So either you say that, that's cool, that resolve the indeterminacy, but the problem is that if you say this, then you will betray the only A and B, David Wiggins only A and B principle. The identity will depend on the absence on the death of P3, which is extrinsic, but which is also contingent. An identity is supposed to be necessary, so it's very strange to make it depend to contingent facts, right? So that's the first branch of the dilemma. And the second branch would be to say, no, it will not resolve the indeterminacy. But here we have a problem. Why? Because if you think that indeterminacy is due to the fact there are too many candidates, then if you reduce the number of candidates, you will resolve it. Okay. So I don't know if it is the good reply, but I think that I will still go for the second branch, and to say that if there was once more than one candidate, it is enough for the persistence of the indeterminacy. So it is not something that can be solved by reducing the number of candidates. And I think that it is quite analogous here to other kinds of indeterminacy. If you think, for instance, of epistemic indeterminacy, so I don't know, if there are two men and they don't know who is the father of the child, let's say that there are only the possibilities are exhaustive. The fact that one of the two men dies does not make the second determinately the father, the biological father of the child. This is more or less the same kind of things here. Dying does not resolve indeterminacy, whether epistemic or ontic.
Yeah, that's probably the way to go. The sort of problem case for that route is the case where you wake up the next morning after the operation and you're told that sort of your operation was successful, the other one was not. But in fact, that person became conscious for a brief moment, for a very brief moment, but not enough to sustain an ongoing life, and died shortly thereafter. Now, even in that case, it would still be indeterminate whether you're the past person, because there was this one moment.
If it is conscious enough to be called a person, at least. Yeah, something that I have to bite, I guess.
Could you go back to a couple of slides where you had the
I think it might take some time to
do you remember the number?
it's this one where the logic formulas are at. So, probably missing something here, but it seems to me that the first follows from the second. So, if that's what's right, then this cannot be true. That logically it follows, because if y and z are the same, and it's for all y and z, so also for when y and z are identical, then the first just follows from the second.
Does it change something if the disjunction is actually exclusive?
Oh.
Because here it is not possible for.
Yeah.
You see and it should be exclusive.
Then it does not follow. That's true.
I'm sorry for that.
Wait. But that would make it even stronger. And so if the second is stronger, then the first should still follow.
Okay.
You see my point? Exclusive disjunction is a stronger claim than an inclusive disjunction, so it still follows.
Okay.
But what you might want to do is restrict the quantifiers so that y should be different from z, and then it doesn't follow anymore.
So repeat this again.
So you could just restrict the quantifiers. And say that y and z have to be different for the second to hold. And then you can just keep the disjunction inclusive. And then the first would not follow anymore from the second.
I see.
But I didn't want to give this logician's remark. But it seems important that this
that's important. In any case, I mean, the formulas are not perfect here. So, for instance, what is presupposed but it's not said is that, I mean, we have only two hemispheres, I mean, but this is not. It should appear in the formula as well.
Yeah, well, if it follows, then it follows also with more information.
Exactly.
So that one's solved in itself. But I guess if you add just the fact that y should be different from z, then it's solved. But then I'm still wondering whether this like an interesting error of formalization is not. I mean, it makes me wonder about what really means this strategy you're proposing. Like, at what level does it start working? When do we really take into account the overdeterminacy here? I cannot get my question very clear, but it seems that you could that you're just assuming classical semantics entirely, which cannot completely be true because there is some overdeterminacy. So at least it should be like a pair-consistent solution to some extent, given that you accept two incoherent world pictures as both kind of right. So it seems that the logic underlying all this should be at least partially non-classical. You cannot completely buy the picture of classical logic if you open up to two incoherent. You see the intuition point? It's a very fuzzy question.
No, I perfectly understand. The thing is that, I mean, there are different frameworks for trying to interpret what is happening here with this kind of indeterminacy. So there is the one that I mentioned from Robbie Williams, the other ones from Elizabeth Barnes. So Barnes like to work with a determinacy operator, So I didn't put the semantic on the slide, but I don't know what. Would it help if I?
Sure. Because I would like to know where the determinacy operators are. That would help a lot for me.
So I think that
which identities here are determinately and which are in the possible world, so to say, and not.
So I think that the idea is that the operators are treated as a contingency operator that must preserve the bivalence. So that's why it is supposed to respect classical semantics. So the idea is that so this is the determinacy operator. It's true. At world W, if tell me if there exists accessible worlds. Let's say U and V such that something like this supposed to be a phi. I think this is something close to this that she has in mind. You see? So this is the determinacy operator. So it is determined that psi is true at world W, even if there exist accessible worlds U and V, such that you have psi in U, but not psi in V, and such that either U is our world or V is our world. I think that this is the basics. And here the idea...
Is it determinate or indeterminate?
Indeterminate.
Indeterminate.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the idea is to take two principles that are supposed to be true together. So the first one is to say that psi let me check. Okay. I psi just be an indeterminate statement. Okay, so it is true that non-IFE and indeterminate and non-IFE, and it is supposed to work with this one. It is determinately true that either IFE or non-IFE. Something like this. So IFE is just an indeterminate statement, like P1 is diachronically identical with P2. Okay? Mm-hmm. So I think that for it to stay within the classical realm, in a sense, these two principles have to be true together. And I think it seems to be possible. So it is indeterminate that IFC and indeterminate that non-IFC, but it is compatible with the idea that it is determinate that either IFC or non-IFC.
No, I completely follow that, and there's no problem in there.
Okay.
What I'm worrying about is how. No, it's not a worry. It's a really open question. Like, how does this work for if we make inferences with identity statements like the formulas you had there? And where should I imagine a determinacy operator? So if you say x is identical to y, x is y, do you mean x is determinately y, or do you just mean x is y?
No, see. Okay, see.
So does, or is it only the full formula that has to be determinate? And we don't put the invisible determinacy operators inside formulas?
Yeah.
So I think it clarifies like how should we reason with identity statement. We have transitivity of identity for determinate identity too, or just for indeterminate identity. I mean, you see the point?
Yeah, I see. I think that what she's trying to do, I don't know if it is the best way to do it, of course, but if it is possible, there should be no indeterminacy within, the states of affairs. So there is nothing like, I don't know, indeterminate instantiation relation or indeterminate properties or things like this. So indeterminacy has really to come outside, in a sense. It has to be due to a multiplicity of precise states of affairs. But here, what you're telling me is that even if you say that, then there are different ways to conceive
Yeah, just how do we read sentences? Like if I say I'm identical to my clone, do I mean identity in one possible personification or one possible determinate version of the worlds? Or do I mean, like, just where are my modalities basically? That's what I'm asking. Like, how should I read formulas? How should I read sentences? And that will determine on whether we can apply that if x is identical to y and y is identical to z, whether x is identical to z. So there's another possible world, so to say, where I'm identical to, suppose I've had this fission operation, and that's in the past. So whether I'm identical to, in the formula we were just talking about, it's like this disjunction. The disjunction seems to be about identity statements in different worlds.
This is a way to express it. You can say that there is a world. You can say that there are two worlds that are qualitatively identical, but only differ with respect to identity facts. This is something that you can do and say that, in world W1 you are the W1 and W2 are qualitatively identical, but in W1 you are determinately identical to P2, and in W2 you're determinately identical to P3. So that would be a way to put the things. I think that this is closer to what Williams has in mind, and the idea is that both worlds are actualized. Okay, so there are multiple actualized worlds, and this is the way we try to express this idea. You see.
I'm not asking about his view, but your view. But anyway.
Honestly, I don't know. I'm not even sure that I believe, honestly, in this kind of metaphysical indeterminacy. In my own work, I'm a defender of the other form of anti-indeterminacy, which is the underdetermination. This is the one that I use to express the open future, for instance. So the idea that future is open. Why? Because there is no state such that the world will be, next year, and so on. So these people are my opponents, but I think that I'm not sure that the solution works well for vagueness, for quantum indeterminacy. I'm not even sure that it works for the open future and this kind of thing. But if there is one domain in which it seems to apply quite plausibly, this is in the case of fission. But regarding the precise, I don't know. I don't know if I'm more in the direction or bands or. You see the
and I actually quite like the solution, but I think it's quite important to have the
I agree. The machinery.
What actually is the drawback here? It seems to happen. You need the drawback. There's some inferences that won't work anymore that you would expect.
So you think that
you can't just keep reasoning classically if you have to deal with two incoherent pictures at the same time. And that's very subtle thing about where are the operators and what kind of how do we interpret sentences? Where can we do inferences? But I don't require you to have a solution. I just was interested if you had one.
But perhaps you're right. So in the perspective of, I don't know if there's something that I will publish at a certain point, but you think that perhaps it will be more clever to have for now, I just have a very modest position, which is to say, I don't know exactly about the debate inside, metaphysical underdetermination. It is just that, if you think that this makes sense, then apply it to but perhaps now the next step will be to choose, the position and to apply it, I don't know, to develop a clear semantics for solving the case, and perhaps,
It's fine. I'm curious.
First a comment, then a question. I really like the talk. Just a comment to maybe help you guys. I remember vaguely to have edited a paper from Christina Conroy in the book Individuals Across sciences about, because she had a similar problem, how to define identity in the multi-worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, and how when you compare someone in a branch and another branch, and she developed part of the tools to do that, the formal tools. Okay. It's probably not as formal as Peter would like, but it's a start about relative identity and transitivity in a tree. In the book I did it, Individuals Across Sciences. It's Christina Conroy. And I think is it identity in multi-universe, blah, 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 interpretation of quantum mechanics. But it's, the quantum mechanics part is not important. It's how do you define identity in a tree when there's a different branch. Okay, my question is that, of course, it reminded me a lot of biological identity when I had to study to develop my own position. And I worry, by analogy to biological identity, that your solution do not make a distinction between two cases, that I think your intuition about psychological continuity will make the difference. So let me explain the two cases. The first case is the fission, ordinary fission, but not the brain blah blah, because that's not clean. And, you know, that's the Star Trek Next Generation transporter being malfunction. So you have two Riker, same memory, same body, with Riker. So that's the first case. That's the closest case. But the other case that I worry that will not make a difference is that if I was some kind of plants, okay, so I'm a plant. No, I'm human plants. Okay. So I can bud the part. Okay, so I can produce another individuals that share part of my memory that is not completely identical, but I keep my body intact and my memory intact. So I have a very strong continuity. Is it me? No. I have a very strong continuity of identity from one side, and I have this budding individuals that have part of my memory. So there's continuity on both sides. But in that case, I think you would say that the main body is the same person.
Agree, but there is a crucial distinction between the two cases, is that in the case I'm presenting, so the fission, the case is perfectly symmetrical. You see?
Yeah, exactly.
See, a case like yours, the supervision strategy will seem to be better because here you can have reasons to prefer, you know, one continuation over the other.
But in that case, it's not indeterminate. It's a question of, you mean that the identity is a continuum.
Yeah, exactly. Or something which is purely semantical.
So I don't care about true or false when it's continuous. I'm just saying you're more this person than this person. Yeah. So I don't want this lot, because you're still working in ordinary logic and things are true or false. Yeah. But if you buy the thing, it's a continuum. You are more or less the same person. Yeah. I think you get much less problem than all that. Because you would say it's not indeterminate the same way, it's just that it's a question of differentiate the case between more in identity, less identity.
But
it's not gradable.
It's
not gradable.
Identity is supposed to be, all or nothing situations, you know. Identity, I mean, if we are talking about numerical identity, so the strong logic relations, I mean, of course, there are people who think...
in that case, you have to say that you don't have the same intuition than me, but you just agreed, so I'm surprised.
Yeah, what I'm saying is that the two cases, the second that you mentioned and the one I'm treating in the talk are completely different. So I'm not sure that I will have the same reply.
Completely different if you are, perfect.
If you're perfect,
because you would say there's continuity, and you don't have a degree of continuity.
Yeah.
You just have continuity. It's overlap. So you don't make the difference between these two cases. But I'm thinking intuitively we would like to say that they are different, so we have to adjust our analysis. Yeah. I think there's a difference between two identical me just arriving here and a little thing going progressively becoming continuous with me, and me, I'm mostly the same structure, the same memory, the same. Because of course the two guys in the transplantation, they have memory, but they don't have the memory of the same body because they are in different bodies. Yeah. So there's a lot of part of the continuity of memory and psychology that is different.
But in the case, the second case that you mentioned, the two candidates are not on a par.
It's what I want to claim.
Exactly.
They are not on a par.
But that's exactly why it is different from the case I'm trying to.
Yeah, but their solution will be the same.
I'm not sure. Why
would not be a par from the indetermination?
I mean, different
solution?
problems, different solutions.
It's an overdetermination. No? There's continuity there, there's continuity
And his
there.
point is that you want to preserve the sufficiency condition of psychological continuity, and it's met in the second case. That's the problem. So like you have psychological continuity. So if those two things are met, then either you have to reintroduce the indeterminacy. You can't just like.
Okay.
I think that's right.
Okay. So okay.
But your point is interesting because you see how intuitively before applying your own theory, you were saying this is not the same, and I agree with you. But your analysis will force me to say it's the same.
Okay, I understand. But first I wanted to apply this solution to the ship of Theseus case, and then I thought that, but I mean the case is not analogous to what I'm trying. Why? Because I mean, you might have reasons to the ship of Theseus case that I have in mind is the one by Chisholm, where you are the two ships, one with the old planks, with the other with the new. And here, since the two candidates are not the same, so one might have arbitrary or not reasons to privilege the ship with the old planks, for instance. Then I'm not sure that in a case like this one, you can apply this solution. I think that it works only intuitively when the two candidates are equally legitimate for being identical to the profession.
But what do you mean by equally legitimate? Since you define identity by continuity, psychological continuity.
Yeah, but the idea is that you cannot. Okay, there is no non-arbitrary reason to privilege P2 over P3 to be identical with P1, and I think that there can be non-arbitrary reason to privilege the ship with the new planks, to be. So that's why I think that the two cases. But
so the identity is not just continuity, and you have to say something about the structure.
Yeah.
Like the ship.
I
something
see.
Part of the ship.
There's something, but I agree with this. I think there is something more.
Isn't in your case the difference in the degree of continuity? Because if there is this...
Of course, even inside the lock solution, if you begin to discuss not just overlap of psychology, memory of experience, but you say there's more. There's, the first guy is completely continuous, and the other one has there's part of the memory that transfer. It's enough to make the difference inside lock approach, but it will be indeterminate.
Here it will be indeterminate.
Well, that's an excellent case. Thank you.
So you can read my paper about gen identity of biological beings, where I treat all the possible trees that you can get. Because there's also, fusion. There's two and reproduction, and you exchange gamete, and you produce a third one.
The reason why I didn't mention fusion in this case is because it is not that clear that the result is a person. When you take an hemisphere from another.
No.
But
I agree. No. Inside the lock approach, you're working inside the lock framework.
Okay, thanks for the talk. I have first just clarification about how the fission objection works. So the situation is we have P1, fission P2, P3. And it seems to me that the problem is that you don't want to say that at the same time that P2 is identical to P1 and P3 is identical to P1.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? This is like the problematic statement you want to avoid, to say at the same time that P2 is identical to.
Yeah.
And saying that P2 is identical to P3, it's not even a problem, right? It's somehow eliminated by your continuity criterion.
So you have P1, P2, P3.
Yeah.
So the problem basically is that you have psychological continuity here, psychological continuity here. Okay, and we do not want to have P2 ultimately to be identical to P3. Why? Because they seem to be different persons, right?
Yes, but it seems this we don't want to do. But it seems to me that in the sort of problematic cases, the sort of the case you wanted to avoid was not these, or not only these, but also the conjunction of identity of P2 to P1 and P3 to P1, right? Or it's okay?
So in a case like this one where there is P2 and P3 after fission, then the identity between P2 and P1 will be indeterminate. Why?
Yes.
Because there is one more than one candidate for the identity with the potential person.
And what about identity between P2 and P3? Why they are not identical?
I mean, because they are two.
What do you mean?
At the same time.
But for example, if we take at the different times, like P2 today and P3 yesterday, why they're not identical? Because there's some asymmetry in the continuity, or?
But I mean, they can form incompatible intentions. They can live like complete separate lives. One can go and marry in Australia. The other one go live in the United States. It would be very strange to say that they are the same persons, right?
But they have continuity, psychological.
They will have at the beginning, of course, because they will remember what happened to P1. But then they will make their own.
Because they will have a set of contradictory.
But you're raising a point which is very interesting. This is something that Oliver Pouilly for physics told me, is that here the argument by Parfit is not good. So the argument by Parfit is to say, oh, but look, it cannot be the same person. Why? Because they would not be able to recognize each other. But Oliver Pouilly told me, yeah, but take, I don't know, time travel, for instance. I mean, of course, you can go back to the past, but perhaps you will not be able to recognize, your former self. But it does not mean that you're not the same person. So it does not seem here that this is a good criterion. Is that close to what you have?
Yeah, because I'm asking this question because I was just curious whether the sort of you rule out this P2 identical to P3 by some. So it seems to me that it's ruled out because you say, oh look, they have some contradictory stories, blah blah blah. Not because there is some sort of asymmetric criterion which shows that there is only one direction in which you can trace this psychological continuity.
Yeah. No, here the criterion is just that it seems that quite obvious that there are two different persons with different lives, and I mean it would be Parfit said that it would be a big distortion of the concept of persons to call them the same person.
Okay.
Yeah. But we are now developing something with a new solution with Fabrice Correa, and our new idea is to say that okay, perhaps this is the same person, but two different proxies, of the same person. So we are trying to. No, I should not mention this, but the idea is that we have to distinguish the question of location to the question of who is the person. And as soon as you make something like this, you can admit that there is only one person, but it can be located at different places.
Okay, so that means that from the point of view of this criterion of psychological continuity, there was nothing which would have prevented us from making identity between P2 and P3, but we do it for some other reasons. And maybe it's good that we do it for some other reason, but this is some other reasons. Yeah. So I was asking this because it seems to me like I'm just also curious. I don't really know the literature well, but when people are trying to answer the transitivity objection, is it the same? So can I go and draw just because I think to reflect this. So, as I understand the transitivity objection, it's the idea that there is, I don't know, P1, P2, P3, and then they say, oh look, this one doesn't remember this one, but actually this one remembers this one, and this one remembers this one.
Yeah.
Right?
In a context in which there is no psychological continuity, strictly speaking. Right? I mean, this is why we now speak of psychological continuity.
Yeah.
It is precisely to avoid the case of forgetting and to avoid the transitivity objection.
And how sort of they will deal with the cases, for example, of short-term amnesia? For example, if there is P3, but then we hit P3, it forgets everything, like it forgets P2, but then there is P4, which remembers only from P1.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then we will say that P4, will we say that P4 is identical to P3 or not?
Yeah. I mean, this is a whole discussion in all the...
Yeah, because it seems to me that if you accept identity between these two in the case when there was a short-term amnesia, you should also accept the identity of this fission branch, no? Or maybe you should say, oh, okay, actually these are not identical because they only connected through this fission event in the past, not through the sort of overlapping continuity.
In the lock approach, amnesia is dying.
Yeah, exactly. If you forget.
In the lock approach.
Yeah, exactly. You're a new
amnesia
person.
is dying.
And
You
there
are a
is
different person.
But then
you're a different
You broke the continuity. It's over.
No.
yeah, but it's in the lock approach. But in the psychological continuity approach, is it?
The part is not it's quite funny because he said, what happens if someone said, oh no, I completely forgot the crime I committed yesterday, I should not be sent to jail. And look, but if there is a doubt, you should send the person to prison anyway, and then God at the end will judge. That's the solution.
That's true.
In the case of psychological continuity, I mean, the case of it depends what you mean by amnesia. If amnesia is total amnesia, then there will be a cut, a complete cut in the continuity, so there will be no continuity, so there will be two different people. If the amnesia is only partial, but you can always identify at least one intense, one if you can have the overlap, then this is enough for the identity to be preserved.
No, it's not, maybe I didn't explain my case correctly. It's not the amnesia that you forgot all your it's the kind of amnesia that you only forget what, for example, if I forgot everything in last 15 minutes, but I remember everything which was before. So the idea is that, for example, P3 remembers P2 and P1 and everything which was before, and then P4 remembers P2 and everything which was before, but doesn't remember P3. And it seems to me that this case is really analogous to this sort of fission. And it seems to me that if you want to stick to psychological continuity, you will have to accept that in this case there is also an indeterminacy involved, saying like, look, we don't know who is actually identical to P2, P3 or P4 who continues to live after. Because I don't see how it's different from the case when we had a fission and then this one is dead. And this one continues. Why is so different? Or these are not different?
Okay. So the point is that what happens if like P2, but only P2 is completely isolated, in the continuity. This is the case that you have in mind, right?
Yes, I can draw it. So
Yeah, it's like you made a dead end. You created like a dead end branch.
I think that it depends how much you want to follow luck, but. Luck will typically say that now we are talking. So P2 will be a different person. I mean, if it is not connected in any way psychologically to the other members of the chain, then it will be a different person.
So the case is like this, and so we go in time, then P3 had give a drug, something like this, use the Man in Black flash. And then the P4 only remembers what happened to P2, and that's it. And doesn't remember this 15 minutes interval. And it seems to me that if you sort of accept this psychological continuity argument, then it's no difference from the case where we had a fission, but then we killed one of the people after 15 minutes. So there was this indeterminate moment, this is sort of, we don't know, we cannot determine whether P4 is identical to P2 or P3 is identical to P2.
Yeah, but here, I mean, I don't know what Alex will about this, but
you can also just, like, you made the point, it's not just about memory. Like, so Locke was fixated on memory, but 20th century people were like, it's like, think about all the things that make you mentally. Like, your memory is just a small subset of those things. Like, you forget all these things. Do you still laugh at the same jokes? Do you still have the same sense of humor? Do you still kind of like want the same stuff you usually want? So you have to imagine a case where all of those things have been, there was a rupture in all of those things. If it's just amnesia, I think it's okay, because there's other kind of psychological content. There's all your other mental states. But if it really is like all of those things disappear.
Yeah, but that's why it's not exactly the Man in Black case that you have in mind. This is something which is more radical. So there is no psychological connection at all, right?
Actually, I think in this particular case, if it's something Men in Black like, I think actually I agree that it's not only memory, but this is why I think it's
But
good
is
to have
just-
a really short-term thing, because arguably in really short interval there is not so much things which change apart from my memories of what happened.
If it is just memory, then I mean there will be continuity through, I don't know, the character traits, through agency, through I don't know, perhaps intentions.
So we'll just rule that, say that there's continuity for all this other stuff, which allows us to say that they are all identical to each other. And that's it.
But now the case that you can.
You don't want to exclude Methuselah. Then the change that is norm is complete, but it's still.
I'm really sorry to take so much time, but why I introduced all this stuff is that it seems to me that you said that in this case you said that if there is a fission, then every event of fission will sort of create this indeterminacy which will rest forever, because we don't want the killing of one of them to reduce indeterminacy.
Yeah.
And I think that this is very analogous case, which also should create indeterminacy.
I mean, I don't see why. It's just the last point, I'm sorry I'm missing. I don't see why it is analogous.
Because you see, if we take this person at this moment of time, and we say it's identical to this one.
I mean, if P3 is completely isolated, so there is no character traits in common, no memories in common, it would be a different person. If psychological continuity is no more guaranteed, then P3 would be a different person, right?
No, it's not that there is, it's just that to ensure, P3 has perfect continuity with all previous stages.
Okay.
And P4 has perfect continuity with all previous stages up to P2. And then, if we want to say that P4 is identical to P3 or not, and in order to argue that P4 is identical to P3, we must accept that it's because they're connected through their memories of P2 or something.
Okay.
Or we shouldn't say that they're identical.
To create that case though, it's almost like you'd have to, you'd have to I'm not sure how you build the hole in the brain required, right? How do you delete, Here's something that would be awesome. How do you go back and just delete, whatever the 18 months of COVID out of my skull, right? And so you take me in 2022 and wire that up to me in 2019. I'm not even sure, but I'm not sure that I know what that means, right?
Is it the eternal sunshine of the spotless mind?
Oh yeah, there you go.
Movie when you can erase.
You can erase, yeah.
Specific, not just specific memory, but all the feeling around these memories, all the characters, and if everybody lies around you.
Yeah, I have a hard time having intuitions about the case because I have a hard time imagining how to cut.
Yeah, but my intuition was about a case of anterograde amnesia.
Oh, you mean drugs?
Saying that I forgot everything in last 15 minutes, but I perfectly remember everything that was before. And I want to argue that I'm still that there is relationship of identity between me 5 minutes back. Arguably, because there are so many continuous things, but then I cannot say why I wouldn't apply the similar argument to the fission case. Because there are so many similar things. Sorry, maybe I don't know.
I just missed the step. I understand your case. I just missed the step. Why? What would be the problem? Why it is analogous to what is happening with the fission case? That's just the step I'm missing. I'm sorry.
Because in fission case there
is nothing in the fission case like, I don't know, a break in psychological continuity. There is nothing analogous to what you're saying about your initial case. I mean,
I think for as that P1 is P2.
Yeah,
P3 is you can make the same range next to
I
it.
think it can be renamed like this.
And you can even go
like this, 1, 2, 3. And then it will be that we attempted to say that this is analogous to this, identical to this, and this is identical to this. But in this case, we don't want to do this to avoid this sort of, or we make it in an indeterminate way. We say one of these two.
Sorry. So I don't want to say in the case of fission that P2 is identical to P1, right? I don't want to say that P3 is identical to P1 either. What I want to say is just that P1 is identical to one of the two, but it is indeterminate which one.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, sorry, I think I need to work out the analogy.
No, perhaps it's just me. I mean, your case is very, very interesting. I have to think more as to whether it is possible to consider like a complete amnesia.
Yeah.
But then this is just the step to this case here that
maybe we can finish it in the bar on a napkin. You just redraw it, so
I think
we can take
there was
one last.
another question.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, Marco. And we began slightly
yeah.
later, so. But let's take paper to the bar and draw stuff.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for the talk. It's a very general question, more relaxed question. It's actually it's kind of a curiosity. The first two curiosities. The first one, I don't know if I'm the only one that it's really the case that you get one brain, you separate two hemispheres in two bodies. And you have, not too personal, I don't want to say that, but you have, it works, really.
No, we don't know actually. So we are not able right now to transplant brains. This is the only, so we can transplant like heart, different things, but brains no. The only thing that we know.
So this study is not based on empirical confirmations.
Kinds of, because we know that it is perfectly possible to live just with half of a brain, just with one hemisphere. And the hemisphere that remains will like work to compensate the loss of the lost hemisphere.
So you do have evidences
and
of
we have
deficiency of one.
Exactly. So we have hundreds of cases of people who are living just with one functional hemisphere, and they can live a perfect normal life. It's very interesting.
Okay, from there you create this.
Exactly, but I mean it is just a way.
Not him.
You, the community.
But I mean it is. I don't know. I mean, it's not necessary to have all this. You can just work with clones or teletransportation or things like this. I don't know why it is like this in the literature. I think it is just a way to make it more naturalistic. But
my question is why this case is kind of contingency, because sometimes it happens that in the literature some people came with an example and after that the literature followed, or there is some more less contingency reason for.
No, it's quite contingent. I think that the original cases, it's not a fission case, this is what we call the Guy Fawkes cases. Do you know this one? Guy Fawkes, yeah. I don't remember who is the only one to mention this case. I would have to check. Perhaps it's Shoemaker or something. So the idea is just the case in which, you take the whole brain, you put in another body, the person wakes up with this person. So this is the original case. And here there is a dispute between the psychologist who say, it will be identical to the person, to the initial person, and the animalist will say, no, of course not. Why? Because it's not the same animal, right?
Yeah.
But then among the person who agree that it is the same person, then there are people who say, but now if we do not transport the whole brain, but only half of the brain, and then put the other half in another, what will you say? And here comes the debate.
Yeah, no, because, I see, it's clear. But my curiosity, the second curiosity was, because we talk a lot about psychological continuity, okay? That is, but I ask this because maybe other examples in which you don't have to move brains in different bodies could be. So the question is, in the literature, there are also examples from is similar to Alexander, but more on psychiatry, kind of when you have some disorder, psychiatric disorder. So intuitively speaking, I talk about bipolar disorder or schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is a little more complex. Bipolar disorder, it seems to me that, this is from an intuitive point of view and from today, it's improvisation, that we have a kind of psychological discontinuity. After that we have to specify if we are talking only about memory or other stuff. It seems to me that there is a psychological discontinuity of some degree, but there is some kind of unique identity. It's one person. So it seems to me that it's the other way around. We're talking more about mind and not brain.
Yeah, I think
so there is a psychological discontinuity. Mm-hmm. Psychological discontinuity along an identity, more or less. This is very speculative. It's only to know if what is your reaction on this more mental and related to other case study.
Yeah, to be honest, I'm not an expert at all on the medical cases, but it seems to me that sometimes the term identity can be a bit ambiguous here, because I mean, here identity is just the logical relation. Basically, this is numerical identity that we are talking about. Sometimes when we say, I don't know, this guy has some trouble, so he's not the same person when he's in such and such state, we are not talking about numerical identity, right? We're more talking about, I don't know, social identity or something like this. But I mean, of course, the patient is still the same person numerically. It's just that it can be in various states or something like this. Would be a right way to. I don't know. I'm not.
I don't know. I was asking if it's trivial or could be interesting for your.
Could be if there is a case in which, I mean, schizophrenia is so strong that, I don't know, they can, like in the American movies, and there can be several different persons in one body. That can be an interesting case. But I think that this is quite quite a Hollywood way to see. To see this.
The disorder are very, very tough sometimes. No?
Okay.
Maybe we could. No, I don't know.
I have.
Maybe we could.
Actually, it's a disorder, an existing disorder. It's not related to schizophrenia. It's like dissociating identity disorder, and it's a disorder where the one body has like different person with different memories, different tastes. There are
but that would be an excellent case for the Lockean against the animalist, because of course there is one animal, but we have here the intuition that there are several people, but it seems to show that perhaps the psychological features are the relevant one to analyze, to characterize identity.
Thank you.
Can you ask you a question
it was just. Thank you for your talk, first of all. There is something I didn't well understood, so I wanted to ask. If we say that P1, P2 or P3 are equal to P1, and you say that there is a possible world in which P1 is identical to P2, and another possible world in which P1 is identical to P3.
Yeah, this is a way to frame the situation. Exactly.
So in the first possible world, that means that in this world, P1 is not identical to P3.
Yeah.
But you said that psychological continuity is the sufficient condition for identity?
To be determinate, but yeah.
To be determinate. Yeah. So I don't well understand how it could be sufficient, because in this possible world, P3 is psychological continuous with P1, but we say that there is no identity.
So it is. That's a very good question. Thank you very much. It is sufficient in a very specific sense. It is sufficient in the sense that where there is psychological continuity, there must be identity. So even in the world that you are thinking of, you're right that P3 would not be identical to P1. But what my criterion said is just that oh, but look, there is psychological continuity, so someone will be identical, and that someone in this world specifically will be P2, right?
Okay.
But I agree that this is what I call the disjunctive sufficiency criterion, in a sense that it's not. So I just to say that I understand your perplexity about this.
Okay.
But you see the idea? It is not possible. See, with Parfit, take Parfit just to contrast his approach with mine. So with Parfit, you can have psychological continuity without identity at all. This is what happens with fission. So you have psychological continuity between P1 and P2 and between P3 and P1 and P3, but P1 is identical to neither of these two guys.
Yeah.
Okay. So psychological continuity is not sufficient condition for identity. In my case, it is not true. Why? Because if you have psychological continuity, what it means that at least someone must be identical with the original person, and this is in this specific sense that it is sufficient condition.
Okay, so it is to say that someone should be identical, but it is not necessary that because there is psychological continuity, someone is identical. If there is psychological continuity, someone will be identical, but there can be a lack in the specification of who will be this person. Okay.
This is a lack of specificity, okay. About who's going to be identical. But as soon as you get identity, I think that I have the right to call my condition sufficient, at least in a disjunctive sense.
Okay.
So I think that my solution is closer to the psychological account than Parfit's one.
Isn't it kind of like exactly the same though? Because survival for Parfit is basically non-branching identity.
Mm-hmm.
So you can just think of it as like, identity is non-branching survival, so it's non-disjunctive survival.
Yeah.
Which entails that survival is disjunctive or non-disjunctive continuity.
Yeah.
And that sounds also like, so psychological continuity guarantees survival, that's how Parfit would put it. And you say, psychological continuity guarantees the existence of someone,
identical,
to whom you're identical. Could be one, could be the other.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds a lot better.
Well, for Parfit, it would make a big difference because all Dennis model is built on the case that identity does not matter at all, and this is a psychological connection. But no, I think that there is still an important difference. The important difference is that with my solution, there cannot be survival without identity, and with Parfit, you can have that.
Perfect. Thanks a lot. Let's keep on discussing around a beer.